October 17th, 1944 dawned grey and cold across the rolling hills of eastern France, where Hauptmann Friedrich Hartmann stood in the commander's hatch of his Sedkavser 251 half-track, studying the wooded terrain through Zeiss binoculars. His reconnaissance battalion, part of the Panzer Lehr Division's screening force, had been tasked with probing American positions near the village of Château-Salins in preparation for a larger counterattack. Behind him, stretched along the narrow forest road, sat 18 more half-tracks of his mechanized reconnaissance company, their Maybach engines rumbling quietly in the autumn morning. The vehicles represented the cutting edge of German mobile warfare doctrine, armored personnel carriers designed to keep pace with panzer formations while protecting their 10-man infantry squads from small arms fire. Hartmann felt confident in his machines. The SDKF Z251's angled armor plates, 14.5 millimeters thick at the front and 8 millimeters along the sloped sides, had proven reliable protection against rifle fire throughout 3 years of war. His men called the vehicles Hanomagzis after their manufacturer, and they had carried panzer grenadiers across Poland, France, Russia, and now back into the shrinking Reich's western approaches. The American forces defending this sector, elements of the United States Third Army's 12th Corps, had been pushing eastward with relentless pressure since the Normandy breakout. Hartmann's intelligence briefings emphasized that American infantry relied primarily on the M1 Garand rifle and the Browning automatic rifle, weapons chambered for the .30-06 cartridge. According to German small arms testing data compiled at the Kummersdorf proving grounds, standard .30 caliber ball ammunition lacked the penetrative power to threaten properly armored vehicles. The briefing documents, which Hartmann had reviewed just 3 days earlier at division headquarters, stated explicitly that American rifle fire posed minimal threat to the SDK's 251's face-hardened steel armor. The .30-06 round could defeat 8 millimeters of vertical armor plate at close range, but the half-track's angular construction and effective armor thickness at typical engagement angles provided substantially more protection. German engineers had designed the vehicle specifically to resist exactly this type of threat. What the intelligence briefings failed to mention, what the testing protocols at Kummersdorf had not anticipated, was that American infantry battalions had been quietly receiving increasing quantities of a specialized ammunition type that would transform the tactical mathematics of light armor engagement. The .30 caliber M2 armor-piercing round, identifiable by its distinctive black-painted tip, featured a hardened steel penetrator core capable of defeating 12.5 millimeters of armor steel at 100 yards. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Corporal James Mackenzie of the 4th Armored Division's attached infantry battalion crouched in a hastily dug foxhole 200 yards from the forest edge, watching the German reconnaissance column approach through the dissipating morning fog. The 22-year-old rifleman from Pennsylvania had joined his unit as a replacement just 6 weeks earlier, following the brutal fighting in the Moselle River crossing operations. Mackenzie's M1 Garand rifle lay across his lap, its 8-round en-bloc clip loaded with something his squad had received only days before. Staff Sergeant William Morrison had distributed the new ammunition with specific instructions. The rounds, marked with distinctive black tips, were designated armor-piercing and intended for use against lightly armored vehicles that American infantry encountered with increasing frequency. Morrison had been explicit in his guidance. Don't waste these on regular infantry targets. Save them for vehicles, motorcycles, armored cars, half-tracks. The black tips will punch through what regular ball ammunition bounces off. Each man in Mackenzie's squad had been issued 40 rounds of the M2 AP ammunition, supplementing their standard ball ammunition load. The intelligence briefing that morning had been equally specific. German reconnaissance units in this sector operated primarily with SDKF 250 and 251 series half-tracks. These vehicles carried 8 to 10 men each and mounted either 20mm autocannon or machine guns for armament. American tank units were engaged elsewhere, meaning infantry would need to deal with German armored vehicles using organic weapons until armor support could be vectored to their positions. Lieutenant Thomas Brennan, commanding Mackenzie's platoon, had deployed his men in a reverse slope defense, Positioning them in forested terrain overlooking the approach route German reconnaissance was most likely to use. The 43 men of 2nd Platoon, Baker Company, represented the only American presence in this particular sector. A communications failure had left them isolated from battalion headquarters, operating independently with no immediate prospect of reinforcement or armor support. Brennan understood the mathematics of the situation with brutal clarity. 19 German half-tracks, each carrying approximately 10 Panzer Grenadiers, meant his platoon faced nearly 200 enemy soldiers supported by vehicle-mounted weapons. In open terrain, those odds would be suicidal. But Brennan had chosen his ground carefully, positioning his men where the forest pressed close to the road, where fields of fire favored defenders, where the German vehicles would be constrained by terrain. The first SDKFZ 251 emerged from the tree line at 0815 hours, its angular bow visible through the thinning mist. Hauptmann Hartmann stood in the commander's hatch, confident in his mission and his machines. His orders were straightforward. Probe the American positions, identify their strength and disposition, withdraw before becoming decisively engaged, standard reconnaissance doctrine that had served the Wehrmacht well for 5 years of war. What Hartmann could not know, what the German intelligence apparatus had failed to properly assess, was that American small arms doctrine had evolved substantially since the Normandy landings. The United States Army Ordnance Department, responding to field reports of increased enemy use of light armored vehicles, had accelerated distribution of armor-piercing rifle ammunition throughout infantry units. By October of 1944, forward infantry battalions were receiving regular shipments of 30 caliber M2 AP rounds alongside standard ball ammunition. The American soldiers had received more than just the ammunition. Training bulletins distributed through division headquarters had emphasized specific engagement techniques for defeating light armor with rifle fire. Concentrate fire on vision ports, engine compartments, and vulnerable areas. Use aimed fire rather than suppressive fire. Target crew-served weapons and exposed personnel. The guidance reflected hard-won lessons from 3 months of combat across France. Sergeant Morrison watched the German column through his field glasses, counting vehicles and calculating ranges. 19 half-tracks, precisely as intelligence had predicted. The lead vehicle was approximately 170 yards distant, well within effective range for the M2 AP ammunition. Morrison waited, watching the column extend itself along the forest road, letting more vehicles enter the kill zone before giving the order to fire. The German Panzer Grenadiers, riding in the open-topped half-tracks, appeared relaxed, weapons slung, some smoking cigarettes. They had conducted dozens of these reconnaissance sweeps over the past weeks, rarely encountering serious opposition. American infantry typically withdrew before German armor, calling for their own tank support rather than engaging directly. The Germans had grown confident, perhaps too confident, in their tactical superiority. Hartmann's half-track advanced to within 150 yards of the American positions before Morrison gave the signal. 43 M1 Garand rifles opened fire simultaneously, the sharp crack of 30-06 rounds echoing across the autumn landscape. But unlike the ball ammunition German troops had grown accustomed to, which ricocheted harmlessly off angled armor plates, the black-tipped M2 AP rounds behaved very differently. Mackenzie's first shot struck the lead half-track's bowplate at a nearly perpendicular angle, the hardened steel penetrator punching through the 14.5mm armor with a sound like a hammer striking an anvil. The round continued through the thin steel bulkhead behind the armor, killing the driver instantly. The vehicle lurched sideways, its dead driver's foot jamming the accelerator, and crashed into a drainage ditch at the road's edge. Hartmann dove into his vehicle's interior compartment as bullets spanged off the armor around him, the distinctive whine of ricochets mixed with the deeper thunk of successful penetrations. His vehicle's gunner, attempting to traverse the turret-mounted MG-42's machine gun toward the American positions, jerked backward as a 30 caliber round penetrated the thin gun shield and struck him in the chest. The second half-track in column swerved to avoid the disabled lead vehicle exposing its thinner side armor to the concentrated American fire. Morrison's squad, positioned at an oblique angle to the road, poured rounds into the vehicle's 8mm side plates. At close range, the M2 AP ammunition had no difficulty defeating armor of this thickness. Multiple penetrations, within seconds, killed the driver and commander, set fire to stored fuel and ammunition, and transformed the vehicle into a burning coffin. Panzer grenadiers began dismounting from their half-tracks, seeking cover and attempting to return fire. But the American positions offered few clear targets. Brennan had positioned his men in defilade, using the forest and terrain to maximum advantage. The Germans, caught in a linear formation on the exposed road, discovered themselves in a kill zone with limited options for maneuver. The 3rd and 4th half-tracks attempted to reverse, their drivers realizing too late that they had driven into an ambush. American riflemen, following Morrison's pre-battle instructions, concentrated their fire on the vehicle's engine compartments. The SD-Kefzit 251's rear armor was only 6mm thick, designed to resist fragments and pistol-caliber rounds, but offering virtually no protection against rifle-caliber armor-piercing ammunition. Mackenzie worked his way through his first en-bloc clip with methodical precision, each shot carefully aimed at the vulnerable points Morrison had identified during the morning's brief: engine grills, vision ports, exposed crew members. The black-tipped rounds performed exactly as promised, penetrating where ball ammunition would have failed. He ejected the empty clip, loaded another, and continued firing. The distinctive ping of the M1 Garand's empty clip ejection punctuated the sustained rifle fire. Across the American line, 43 rifles created a nearly continuous stream of armor-piercing rounds impacting German vehicles. The concentration of fire, combined with the ammunition's superior penetrative capability, proved devastating to the lightly armored half-tracks. Hartmann, attempting to rally his scattered forces and organize a tactical withdrawal, emerged from his vehicle's interior to assess the situation. What he saw shocked him. 5 of his 19 vehicles were already burning or disabled. Panzer grenadiers lay dead or wounded along the road, cut down as they attempted to dismount. The American fire, rather than slackening, seemed to intensify. German doctrine emphasized aggressive action in response to ambush. Hartmann ordered his vehicles to push forward to close with the American positions and use their superior numbers to overwhelm the defenders. But the terrain worked against this tactic. The narrow forest road offered no room for maneuver, and attempting to deploy through the surrounding woodland meant exposing vehicles to fire from multiple angles. The 6th half-track attempted to advance past the burning wrecks blocking the road, its commander standing in the hatch and directing the driver forward. Morrison assigned 3 riflemen to concentrate fire on this vehicle, their combined shooting representing the doctrine of focused fire that American infantry training emphasized. Within 10 seconds, 12 armor-piercing rounds had struck the vehicle's frontal armor and superstructure. 4 penetrated successfully, killing the commander and wounding the driver. The vehicle veered off the road, crashed through underbrush, and came to rest against a large oak tree. The surviving Panzer grenadiers bailed out, seeking cover, but found themselves under fire from multiple directions as Brennan's flanking squads engaged them with both rifles and the platoon's 2 Browning automatic rifles. This sustained engagement, which would last another 47 minutes, represented a fundamental shift in the tactical balance between American infantry and German light armor. For 3 years, German mechanized forces had operated with the reasonable confidence that their armored vehicles provided effective protection against rifle fire. This confidence, built on extensive combat experience and supported by technical testing, had shaped German tactical doctrine and operational planning. But the introduction of widespread armor-piercing rifle ammunition among American infantry units had quietly invalidated this assumption. The SD-Kefzit 251 half-track, designed to resist 7.92mm Mauser rifle fire and standard 30-06 ball ammunition, offered little protection against rounds specifically engineered to defeat light armor plate. At 0900 hours, Hauptmann and Hartmann made the decision to withdraw. 11 of his 19 vehicles were destroyed, disabled, or burning. Casualty figures among his Panzer grenadiers exceeded 60%. The reconnaissance mission had become a disaster, and continuing to press forward would result only in additional losses without achieving any tactical gain. The withdrawal proved nearly as costly as the initial engagement. American riflemen maintained fire discipline, continuing to engage the retreating German vehicles with armor-piercing ammunition. 2 more half-tracks were disabled during the withdrawal, their engines penetrated by concentrated rifle fire. The Panzer Grenadiers, forced to provide covering fire for their withdrawing vehicles, suffered additional casualties from American rifle and automatic weapons fire. By 0930 hours, the German reconnaissance battalion had broken contact and withdrawn beyond effective rifle range. Behind them, strung along 300 yards of forest road, lay the burning remains of 13 Stickats 251 half-tracks. The engagement had lasted 75 minutes from first shot to final withdrawal. American casualties totaled 3 killed and 7 wounded. German losses exceeded 120 killed or wounded, with 13 armored vehicles destroyed and 2 more damaged but recoverable. Lieutenant Brennan conducted a hasty after-action assessment, moving among his positions to check casualties and redistribute ammunition. His platoon had expended nearly 1,800 rounds of 30-caliber ammunition during the engagement, approximately 40% of it the black-tipped, armor-piercing variety. The effectiveness of the specialized ammunition had exceeded even the optimistic assessments provided in training bulletins. Mackenzie, helping treat wounded soldiers at the platoon aid station, found himself replaying the engagement mentally. The German half-tracks had seemed formidable when they first appeared, angular and menacing in the morning mist. But concentrated rifle fire using proper ammunition had proven devastatingly effective. The black-tipped rounds had penetrated armor that should have provided protection, turning vehicles designed for frontline combat into death traps for their crews. Sergeant Morrison collected spent cartridge cases for the company's after-action report, noting the mixture of black-tipped armor-piercing rounds and standard ball ammunition. The engagement would provide valuable data for evaluating the effectiveness of M2 AP ammunition in actual combat conditions. Morrison suspected that higher headquarters would be very interested in how a single infantry platoon, properly positioned and equipped with appropriate ammunition, had destroyed 13 armored vehicles without armor support. The radio man finally re-established contact with battalion headquarters at 1100 hours. Brennan's situation report, it transmitted in standard military brevity code, caused immediate consternation at the battalion command post. A single infantry platoon had engaged and defeated a German reconnaissance battalion. The operations officer requested confirmation, received it, and immediately dispatched a patrol to verify the contact and assess the battlefield. The verification patrol arrived 3 hours later, led by the battalion intelligence officer, Captain Robert Davies. What Davies found exceeded the already impressive claims in Brennan's initial report. 13 destroyed or disabled SDKs, 2 51 half-tracks stretched along the forest road, their armor riddled with penetrations from small arms fire. German dead lay scattered across the engagement area. Expended cartridge cases, many bearing the distinctive black tip paint of armor-piercing ammunition, littered the American defensive positions. Davies conducted a detailed technical examination of several disabled vehicles, photographing penetration patterns and measuring entry wounds in the armor plate. His findings would form the basis of an intelligence bulletin distributed throughout 12th Corps within 72 hours. The report's conclusions were stark. 30 caliber M2 armor-piercing ammunition represented a significant threat to German light armored vehicles, including the widely deployed SD-Kaut 250 and 251 series half-tracks. The after-action photographs Davies took showed the reality of armor-piercing ammunition's effectiveness against light armor. Clean holes punched through supposedly protective steel plate. Vehicles rendered combat ineffective by sustained rifle fire. The images contradicted the prevailing assumption among German forces that their mechanized infantry vehicles provided reliable protection against small arms engagement. News of the engagement spread rapidly through American infantry units in the sector. Within days, requests for additional armor-piercing ammunition flooded through supply channels. Infantry company commanders previously resigned to withdrawing before German armored vehicles, pending arrival of anti-tank support, began developing tactics for engaging light armor with organic weapons. The psychological impact of knowing that rifle fire could defeat enemy armor proved as significant as the tactical implications. The German response took longer to develop, but proved equally consequential. Hauptmann Hartmann's after-action report, filed from a field hospital where he was being treated for shrapnel wounds, reached 5th Panzer Army headquarters 4 days after the engagement. The report's description of American rifle ammunition defeating SDKFZ 251 armor initially faced skepticism from staff officers who assumed Hartmann was attempting to explain away a tactical defeat. But the pattern repeated across multiple engagements throughout late October and early November of 1944. German reconnaissance units, previously operating with confidence in their vehicles' protective capabilities, began reporting significant losses to American rifle fire. Half-track casualties, mounted not from dedicated anti-tank weapons, but from concentrated small arms engagement by infantry units equipped with armor-piercing ammunition. Oberstleutnant Hans Weber, commanding the Panzer Lehr Division's reconnaissance battalion, compiled data from 10 separate engagements between October the 15th and November 5th. The statistics painted a disturbing picture. 37 half-tracks destroyed or disabled by rifle fire, over 200 casualties among Panzer Grenadier crews and passengers, multiple instances of American infantry platoons and companies successfully engaging German mechanized forces without anti-tank weapon support. Weber's report, forwarded to Army Group G headquarters, reached the desk of Oberbefehlshaber West, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, in mid-November. The implications were clear and concerning. American infantry, previously considered relatively ineffective against armored vehicles, had acquired both the weapons and tactics to threaten German light armor. The tactical advantage German mechanized forces had enjoyed since 1939 was eroding. But by mid-November 1944, Germany's military situation afforded little opportunity for tactical or materiel response to this development. Production priorities focused on tanks and assault guns rather than improved armored personnel carriers. Training time for replacement crews and infantry had been compressed to dangerous minimums. Most critically, the strategic situation along all fronts meant German forces operated in increasingly desperate circumstances where tactical refinements mattered less than basic resource constraints. The engagement near Château-Salins on October 17th, 1944, represented a microcosm of broader shifts in the technological and tactical balance between American and German forces. While individual German weapons and vehicles often maintained qualitative advantages over their American counterparts, the United States military's systematic approach to identifying and addressing capability gaps proved decisive over time. The .30 caliber M2 armor-piercing ammunition exemplified this pattern. American Ordnance Department engineers, responding to field reports of inadequate small arms effectiveness against light armor, had developed and fielded a solution within months. The ammunition's distribution through infantry units had been accomplished systematically, accompanied by training materials and tactical guidance. The result transformed American infantry capabilities against a specific threat category without requiring new weapons or major doctrinal changes. Sergeant Morrison, writing a letter to his wife 3 days after the engagement, struggled to convey the psychological impact of the experience. For months, we'd been told to run from German armor and wait for our tanks to show up. But those black-tipped rounds changed everything. We could hear them punching through steel. We could see the half-tracks burning from rifle fire. Made us realize we weren't as helpless as we thought. This psychological dimension proved as important as the tactical implications. American infantry units that had previously viewed German armored vehicles with a mixture of respect and apprehension began approaching such encounters with confidence. The knowledge that properly employed rifle fire could defeat light armor fundamentally altered the tactical calculations of small unit commanders throughout the theater. Mackenzie, promoted to sergeant following the engagement and awarded the Silver Star for his actions, would later reflect on the battle's significance in interviews conducted by military historians. "We destroyed 13 armored vehicles with rifles. That wasn't supposed to be possible, but the AP rounds worked exactly like they were supposed to." Made me understand that technology matters as much as courage in modern war. The ammunition itself represented relatively straightforward engineering. A hardened steel core, wrapped in a gilding metal jacket, fired at the standard 30-06 muzzle velocity of 2,800 feet per second. But the cumulative effect of distributing millions of these rounds to frontline infantry units had strategic implications far beyond the individual cartridge's technical specifications. German tactical intelligence, attempting to understand and counter this development, issued guidance to mechanized units throughout November and December of 1944. Reconnaissance forces were instructed to avoid extended engagements with American infantry, to maintain greater standoff distances, to request armored fighting vehicle support rather than relying solely on half-tracks for protection. But these tactical adjustments came too late to significantly impact the overall campaign's trajectory. The production of SDKF SIT 250 and 251 half-tracks continued through early 1945, with later variants featuring marginally improved armor protection. But material constraints and Allied bombing of German industrial facilities meant significant design improvements proved impossible. The vehicles that had seemed so formidable in 1939 and 1940 continued rolling off assembly lines in 1944 with fundamentally unchanged protective capabilities, increasingly inadequate against evolving American infantry weapons and ammunition. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The broader implications of the Château-Salins engagement extended beyond immediate tactical considerations. American military planners, analyzing the effectiveness of M2 AP ammunition against German light armor, began developing similar specialized ammunition for other calibers and applications. The 50 caliber M2 armor-piercing incendiary round received accelerated development and fielding. Infantry anti-tank tactics evolved to incorporate concentrated small arms fire as a preliminary measure before employing dedicated anti-tank weapons. Most significantly, the engagement demonstrated the effectiveness of systematic problem-solving applied to tactical challenges. The United States military's institutional capability to identify capability gaps, develop solutions, field them to operational units, and provide supporting training and doctrine proved decisive across numerous technological domains throughout the war. The 30 caliber armor-piercing ammunition represented just one example of this broader pattern. By contrast, German forces increasingly struggled with this adaptation cycle. Resource constraints, strategic overstretch, and the cumulative effects of years of combat degraded the Wehrmacht's ability to respond effectively to tactical challenges. New weapon systems like the Panzerfaust represented brilliant engineering solutions to specific problems. But German industrial capacity could not support systematic modernization across all capability areas simultaneously. The Halftracks, destroyed near Château-Salins on October 17th, 1944, represented more than tactical losses for the Panzer Lehr Division. They symbolized the erosion of German tactical advantages that had characterized the war's early years. The vehicles, their armor penetrated by what German intelligence had dismissed as inadequate American rifle ammunition, stood as testament to the changing technological and industrial balance between the combatants. Hauptmann Hartmann, recovering from his wounds in a military hospital near Frankfurt, learned in mid-November that his reconnaissance battalion had been disbanded, its surviving personnel redistributed to other units. The losses suffered in the Château-Salins engagement, combined with additional casualties in subsequent operations, had rendered the unit combat ineffective. Hartmann himself would be reassigned to a training battalion, his frontline combat career effectively ended by the ambush that had shattered his company. The soldiers who had ridden those half-tracks into the autumn morning ambush represented the human cost of inadequate intelligence and flawed assumptions. Young panzer grenadiers, many of them 18 or 19 years old, had trusted in their vehicles' protective capabilities based on years of successful combat experience. That trust had proven fatally misplaced when confronted with ammunition specifically designed to defeat light armor. Technical analysis of the engagement conducted by American and later by German military engineers revealed the precise mechanics of the M2 AP ammunition's effectiveness. The round's hardened steel core, weighing 163 grains and traveling at 2,600 feet per second at 100 yards, could penetrate 12.5 millimeters of armor steel at perpendicular impact. Against the SD Kefzedit 2 51's 14.5 millimeter frontal armor, this represented marginal capability requiring near-perpendicular impact angles. But combat geometry rarely involved perfect perpendicular impacts. Most engagements occurred at oblique angles, where the effective armor thickness was reduced by the angle of attack. Additionally, the Halftracks side and rear armor, 8 millimeters and 6 millimeters respectively, offered virtually no protection against the M2 AP round. Concentrated fire from multiple riflemen striking a vehicle from various angles overwhelmed protective capabilities designed for a very different threat environment. The ammunition's development history reflected the American military's systematic approach to capability development. United States Army Ordnance Department engineers at Frankfurt Arsenal had been refining armor-piercing small arms ammunition since the 1920s, driven initially by requirements for aircraft armament against lightly armored targets. By 1939, the 30-caliber M2 AP round had achieved standardization, offering reliable performance against light armor plate at combat ranges. Initial production remained limited, with the ammunition reserved primarily for aircraft machine guns and specialized applications. But combat reports from North Africa and Italy, detailing encounters with German and Italian light armored vehicles, prompted expanded production and distribution to ground forces. By mid-1944, substantial quantities were reaching infantry units in the European theater, transforming the tactical capabilities of rifle companies and battalions. The ammunition itself was identifiable by distinctive features that prevented confusion with standard ball ammunition. The black-painted bullet tip provided immediate visual identification. The cartridge head stamp included specific lot and manufacturer markings. Weight differences between the 163-grain AP round and the 152-grain M2 ball round were noticeable to experienced soldiers. These identification features proved crucial in ensuring proper tactical employment. Sergeant Morrison, conducting a training session for replacement soldiers 3 weeks after the Château-Salins engagement, emphasized these identification features and their tactical significance. You need to know which ammunition you're firing: ball ammo for regular targets, AP ammo for vehicles and equipment. Don't waste the black tips on infantry. Save them for when you need penetration. His guidance reflected the practical experience of a veteran non-commissioned officer who had seen the ammunition's effectiveness firsthand. The tactical employment doctrine that developed around armor-piercing ammunition emphasized concentration of fire and target selection. Rather than having entire squads engage armored vehicles, American small unit tactics called for designated marksmen to concentrate AP fire on specific vehicles, while other soldiers provided suppressive fire against accompanying infantry. This division of labor maximized ammunition efficiency while maintaining tactical effectiveness. Lieutenant Brennan, promoted to captain and assigned to battalion headquarters following the engagement, contributed to the development of these tactical guidelines. His after-action report, widely distributed throughout Third Army, provided specific recommendations for engaging light armor with infantry weapons. The report emphasized terrain selection, concentration of fire, target prioritization, and coordination with supporting weapons. These principles became foundational elements of American infantry doctrine for dealing with German mechanized forces. The German response to these tactical developments evolved slowly and incompletely. Intelligence summaries distributed to frontline units in November and December of 1944 warned of improved American small arms ammunition, but provided limited tactical guidance for countering it. The fundamental problem was material rather than tactical. German half-tracks could not be substantially up-armored without compromising their mobility and cross-country performance. Replacing the entire fleet with better protected vehicles was industrially impossible, given Germany's resource constraints. Some field modifications appeared as German units attempted to adapt. Additional armor plate welded to vulnerable areas, sandbags and spare track links attached to vehicle sides and fronts. These expedients offered marginal improvements in protection, while adding weight and reducing performance. But they represented desperate attempts to address a fundamental design limitation through improvisation rather than systematic engineering solutions. Oberst Weber, in his November report to higher headquarters, acknowledged this reality with characteristic German military frankness. The American .30 caliber armor-piercing ammunition represents a significant threat to our light armored vehicles, for which no immediate material solution exists. Tactical measures, including increased dispersion, greater use of supporting fires, and avoiding extended engagements, offer partial mitigation, but do not eliminate the vulnerability. Operational planning must account for increased half-track losses when operating against American infantry forces. This assessment, while accurate, offered little comfort to soldiers and commanders operating the vulnerable vehicles. Panzer Grenadier morale suffered as word spread of half-tracks being destroyed by rifle fire. The vehicles that had provided both transportation and psychological security became viewed with suspicion by troops who understood that armor protection might prove illusory when facing American forces equipped with proper ammunition. The engagement near Château-Salins, while tactically significant, represented only one of hundreds of similar encounters throughout the final 8 months of the war in Europe. American infantry units, increasingly confident in their ability to engage German light armor, developed aggressive tactics that would have seemed reckless earlier in the war. German mechanized forces, conversely, became more cautious, their tactical options constrained by vulnerability to weapons previously considered ineffective. Captain Davies, the intelligence officer who had documented the Château-Salins battlefield, compiled statistical data on half-track losses throughout 12th Corps from October through December of 1944. His analysis identified 137 confirmed SD-Kfz 250 and 251 vehicles destroyed or disabled by small arms fire during this 3-month period. The figure represented a significant percentage of total German armored vehicle losses in the sector and suggested that concentrated rifle fire using armor-piercing ammunition had become a primary cause of half-track casualties. This data influenced American tactical planning and resource allocation. Distribution of M2 AP ammunition increased substantially, with forward infantry battalions receiving larger allocations and resupply prioritization. Training emphasis on engaging armored vehicles with rifle fire intensified at replacement training centers. Infantry officers began treating concentrated small arms fire as a legitimate anti-armor technique rather than a desperation measure pending arrival of dedicated anti-tank weapons. The psychological dimension of these developments extended beyond immediate tactical considerations. American soldiers, who had endured months of feeling outmatched by German armor and mechanized forces, gained confidence from knowing their rifles could defeat enemy vehicles. This confidence translated into more aggressive tactical behavior, greater willingness to hold positions in face of German mechanized attacks, and improved overall combat effectiveness. Mackenzie, by now a squad leader, observed this transformation among his soldiers. The replacements we get now, they don't have that fear of German armor that we had early on. They know the black-tipped rounds work. They've seen the training films showing half-tracks getting shredded by rifle fire. Makes them steadier under fire, more willing to engage targets that would have panicked older soldiers. His observation reflected a broader shift in American infantry culture as the war progressed. German soldiers experienced the inverse psychological effect. Panzer Grenadiers, who had previously felt secure in their half-tracks, now understood that American rifle fire represented a genuine threat. This awareness affected behavior in subtle but significant ways. Greater reluctance to mount up during engagements. Increased use of dismounted tactics that negated the half-track's mobility advantages. Degraded unit cohesion as soldiers lost confidence in their vehicles' protective capabilities. A captured German report taken from a destroyed battalion headquarters near Metz in late November 1944 detailed the morale impact of half-track losses. The report, written by a Wehrmacht chaplain, noted that Panzer Grenadiers increasingly viewed their vehicles as death traps rather than protection, preferring to fight on foot despite tactical disadvantages. The chaplain attributed this attitude to repeated instances of vehicles being penetrated by American small arms fire that troops had been told would be ineffective. The material reality behind these psychological effects was stark. German half-track production, while continuing through early 1945, could not replace combat losses at a sustainable rate. Allied air attacks on German industrial facilities, combined with raw material shortages and transportation disruptions, meant vehicle availability decreased throughout the war's final months. Units that suffered heavy half-track losses in engagements like Château-Salins often could not reconstitute to full strength. American forces, conversely, enjoyed essentially unlimited ammunition supply. The 30 caliber M2 AP round, while more expensive to produce than ball ammunition, required no exotic materials or complex manufacturing processes. Lake City Army Ammunition Plant and other facilities produced millions of rounds monthly, ensuring that forward units never faced shortages. This industrial capacity differential, repeated across dozens of material categories, proved decisive in determining the war's outcome. The Battle of the Bulge, in December 1944, provided further confirmation of armor-piercing ammunition's tactical significance. German mechanized forces, launching Hitler's last major offensive in the West, encountered American infantry units equipped with substantial quantities of M2 AP rounds. Multiple engagements throughout the Ardennes sector featured American infantrymen successfully engaging German half-tracks with rifle fire, disrupting German tactical plans that depended on mechanized infantry mobility. One particularly notable engagement occurred near Bastogne on December 21st, where a company of the 101st Airborne Division's 527th Parachute Infantry Regiment destroyed 8 SDKFZ-2 51 half-tracks using primarily rifle fire. The paratroopers, surrounded and fighting under desperate circumstances, discovered that their rifles equipped with armor-piercing ammunition could defeat the vehicles attempting to overrun their positions. The engagement became a case study in infantry anti-armor tactics and further validated the tactical doctrine developed following engagements like Château-Salins. By January 1945, the tactical reality was well established across both armies. American infantry could and would engage German light armor with small arms when properly equipped and positioned. German mechanized forces understood this vulnerability and adjusted tactics accordingly, though material constraints limited effective responses. The balance of tactical effectiveness had shifted decisively in favor of American forces across multiple capability areas. Technical analysis of captured German vehicles provided American engineers with detailed understanding of enemy armor protection. Intelligence bulletins distributed to infantry units included precise specifications for SDKFZ 250 and 251 armor thickness, optimal engagement, ranges for M2 AP ammunition, and recommended aim points for maximum effect. This information, combined with field experience, enabled American infantry to engage German armored vehicles with informed confidence rather than hopeful improvisation. The ammunition itself underwent continuous refinement throughout the war. Later production lots featured improved penetrator metallurgy, offering marginally better performance against face-hardened armor plate. Quality control procedures ensured consistent performance across different manufacturers and production batches. These incremental improvements, while individually modest, collectively enhanced the ammunition's effectiveness and reliability. Sergeant Morrison, By war's end, a platoon sergeant decorated for actions in 3 separate campaigns retained vivid memories of the October 17th engagement. That morning changed how I thought about the war. We'd been reacting to German equipment advantages for so long, but those black-tipped rounds proved that American industry could give us tools to fight on equal terms, maybe better than equal. His reflection captured the significance of what might seem a minor technical development, but had profound tactical implications. The German soldiers who survived the Château-Salins engagement carried their own memories, darker and more bitter. Lieutenant Karl Schneider, who had commanded one of the half-track platoons, spent the war's final months in an American prisoner of war camp after being captured near the Rhine in March 1945. In post-war interviews, he described the psychological impact of that October ambush. We had always trusted our vehicles. They had protected us in Russia, in France, everywhere. Then suddenly American rifle fire was punching through armor that should have stopped it. It felt like betrayal. Though, of course, the armor hadn't changed. The threat had evolved. This evolution of threat characterized the entire technological competition between the combatants. Neither side maintained permanent advantages in any single capability area. Instead, temporary superiorities were achieved, exploited, then countered through enemy adaptation. The 30 caliber armor-piercing ammunition represented one iteration of this endless cycle, a solution to a specific problem that would itself eventually face. Countermeasures had the war continued long enough. The industrial dimension proved ultimately decisive. American capacity to produce vast quantities of specialized ammunition, distribute it throughout the force, and provide supporting training and doctrine demonstrated systematic strength that German forces could not match. This pattern repeated across countless material categories, from artillery shells to aircraft, to vehicles to electronics. The cumulative effect of American industrial superiority, when combined with improving tactical competence, overwhelmed German qualitative advantages in individual weapons or unit performance. Lieutenant Brennan, by war's end a major commanding a battalion, reflected on these broader patterns in a letter written from occupation duty in Germany in July 1945. We won because we could learn and adapt faster than they could. The black-tipped ammunition was just one small example. We identified a problem, developed a solution, fielded it to troops, and trained them to use it effectively, all in less than a year. The Germans couldn't match that cycle time. Not with their industrial base collapsing and their training system degraded. That's what victory looks like at the operational level. The half-tracks destroyed near Château-Salins on October the 17th, 1944, rusted in place for months after the battle. Local French civilians returning to their villages as combat moved eastward stripped the vehicles of anything useful. Children played among the wrecks until American graves registration units cleared the area in spring of 1945. Eventually, scrap metal dealers removed the vehicles for salvage, erasing the physical evidence of the engagement. But the tactical and doctrinal lessons survived in official reports, training materials, and veterans' memories. The engagement became a case study at the United States Army Infantry School at Fort Benning, used to illustrate proper employment of armor-piercing ammunition against light armor targets. German military analysis, conducted by former Wehrmacht officers working for American intelligence services, included detailed examination of the engagement as an example of tactical adaptation and its consequences. Mackenzie, discharged from service in November 1945, returned to his pre-war job as a machinist in Pennsylvania. He rarely spoke of his combat experiences, a common pattern among veterans of that generation. But he kept his awarded medals and a single souvenir from the war, a spent .30 caliber cartridge case with the distinctive black tip paint still visible on the recovered bullet. The case sat on his workshop bench for decades, a small reminder of the morning when properly designed ammunition and well-trained soldiers had destroyed 13 armored vehicles with rifle fire. The broader significance of the engagement, and hundreds like it throughout the war's final months, lay in demonstrating the decisive importance of systematic military competence. Individual courage mattered, tactical skill mattered, but industrial capacity and institutional adaptability mattered more. The United States military of 1944 bore little resemblance to the force that had fumbled through its early North African engagements. Improved training, better equipment, refined doctrine, and hard-won experience had transformed American forces into a formidable fighting machine. German forces, despite maintaining high levels of individual unit effectiveness and tactical competence, could not overcome the cumulative effects of strategic overreach, industrial inadequacy, and enemy adaptation. The Wehrmacht's tactical excellence in 1944 proved insufficient when facing opponents who had closed capability gaps and achieved material superiority across most domains. The Halftracks destroyed by rifle fire represented one small manifestation of this broader strategic reality. Hauptmann Hartmann, released from American custody in 1947, eventually wrote a memoir detailing his wartime experiences. The October 17th engagement received extended treatment, with Hartmann acknowledging that German intelligence had fundamentally misunderstood American infantry capabilities. We thought we knew their strengths and weaknesses. We had extensive documentation of their weapons and equipment, but we failed to account for their capacity to improve and adapt. The armor-piercing ammunition was not revolutionary technology. It was simply good engineering applied to a tactical problem. Our failure was assuming they would remain static while we evolved. This self-awareness, common among German military professionals in the post-war period, reflected genuine understanding of the factors that had determined the war's outcome. Technical competence alone could not compensate for industrial inadequacy and strategic misjudgment. The Wehrmacht's tactical sophistication, while impressive, ultimately proved irrelevant when confronting enemies who could match that sophistication while maintaining overwhelming material advantages. The .30 caliber M2 armor-piercing ammunition remained in American military service for decades after World War II. The round saw extensive use during the Korean War, where it proved effective against North Korean and Chinese light armored vehicles. Surplus stocks lasted through the Vietnam era, with the ammunition finally being declared obsolete only after the United States Army's transition to 7.62 mm NATO standard caliber in the late 1950s. Even in obsolescence, the round's legacy persisted. Modern armor-piercing small arms ammunition design traced direct lineage to the engineering principles established in the 1930s and refined through World War II combat experience. The fundamental concept, a hardened penetrator core in a conventional cartridge case, remained valid across multiple technological generations. Contemporary military forces worldwide employ variants of this basic design, testament to the enduring soundness of the original engineering. For the soldiers who fought near Château-Salins on that October morning in 1944, these broader historical patterns mattered less than immediate survival and mission accomplishment. They had done their duty, using the tools provided by their nation's industrial system and the training provided by their military institution. The engagement's tactical success reflected individual competence supported by systematic excellence, the combination that characterized American military performance throughout the war's final years. The forest road where the engagement occurred exists today as a minor departmental route in eastern France. No monument marks the location. Local residents, if they remember the war at all, recall the broader campaign rather than specific engagements. The ground itself shows no trace of the violence that occurred there 8 decades ago. Yet, the engagement's significance persists in military archives and historical records, a small but telling example of how technological adaptation and tactical evolution shaped the Second World War's outcome. The lesson, if one can be extracted from this particular engagement's complex details, concerns the decisive importance of systematic military competence. Wars are won not through individual tactical victories, but through sustained institutional capability to identify problems, develop solutions, and implement them at scale. The United States military's capacity for this systematic problem-solving, exemplified by the development and fielding of armor-piercing rifle ammunition, proved more valuable than any single weapon system or tactical innovation. The German forces, despite their justified reputation for tactical excellence and engineering sophistication, ultimately lost because they could not sustain the systematic excellence required for victory in industrial-age warfare. The half-tracks destroyed by American rifle fire near Château-Salins stood as monuments to this fundamental strategic reality. Superior individual weapons and superior individual soldiers proved insufficient when confronting an enemy capable of matching competence while maintaining decisive advantages in industrial capacity and institutional adaptability. This truth, uncomfortable for those who prefer narratives of heroic individual action, characterized the Second World War's outcome across all theaters and campaigns. The conflict was decided not by courage or tactical brilliance, though both played important roles, but by industrial capacity, resource availability, and institutional competence at mobilizing national strength for sustained military operations. The .30 caliber armor-piercing ammunition represented just one small manifestation of American systematic strength, but it encapsulated the broader pattern that determined the war's outcome. The soldiers who fought that October morning, American and German alike, participated in events whose significance extended far beyond their immediate experience. Their actions, while tactically decisive, formed part of a vast historical process involving millions of participants across multiple continents. Understanding their story requires acknowledging both individual agency and structural constraints, both personal courage and systematic capabilities. The 13 destroyed half-tracks, the casualties on both sides, the tactical lessons learned and disseminated all contributed to the eventual Allied victory. Not decisively, not individually, but as part of the cumulative weight of countless engagements, where American forces demonstrated improving competence and Germans confronted the consequences of strategic overreach. This was modern war's reality, stripped of romance and reduced to its essential elements. Organized violence between industrial societies, decided ultimately by capacity for sustained systematic excellence rather than individual heroism or tactical brilliance. That October morning, near Château-Salins, 43 American infantrymen with properly designed ammunition defeated 19 German armored vehicles. The engagement lasted 75 minutes. The tactical outcome was clear. The strategic significance was modest, but the engagement exemplified patterns that characterized the entire war's final phase. Understanding these patterns requires looking beyond individual battles to examine the broader institutional and industrial competition that determined the Second World War's outcome. The armor-piercing ammunition, seemingly minor in itself, represented American systematic strength that German forces could not match and ultimately could not defeat. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.